that we did a personality test when I was in a workshop, and they were saying that you have some personalities that don't necessarily work well with other personalities. What are some myths, as I see you land on that one? What are some myths about conflict that we often believe?
Conflict is only at work. Conflict is dysfunctional in the workplace. Conflict represents communication breakdown, like how you talked about the different types of personalities, because self-awareness is quite vital to conflict resolution and to the conflicts that might arise. If you're having a conflict, the physical effects will be there as well.
Yeah.
And the emotional effects will be there, and it will impact your productivity.
So I want to ask the question, why do you think people have such bad communicative skills? From a gender perspective, do you think there's a difference between how men and women handle conflict?
Okay, so I'll definitely say yes, there is a difference. But okay, so when we start off as babies and adolescents, right? The way that males and females tend to handle conflict is completely different. I definitely say that females tend to be a woman. I try not to use females. Women, they tend to be persons who want to find a solution. They try to compromise as much as possible. But they're very subliminal and indirect with how they handle conflict. On the other hand, men now, they're more direct. They tend to put off the conflict. They don't want to talk about it right now. They tend to want to protect their egos and protect their stance, and they don't want to back down necessarily. So they might just brush it off. They might just, ignore it. Whereas women, on the other hand, they tend to be a little bit more emotional, a little bit more indirect, and they want to handle it now. You understand? So, but actually, research actually tells you that maybe 66% of times, 2 to 3 times, you'd find that the gender is not that significant. The gender rule is not that significant. It's more just about you, yourself, and the person that you're having a conflict with in order to solve it. Because everybody has their own personality type, their personality style, that sort of thing. So some people may want to, regardless if you're male or female, may want to solve it one time, whereas on the other hand, some people may not. Yeah.
So do you think like this can be linked to like the workplace and how both gender are handled? Yes, I know that you said that genders don't really play a big part, like 60%. Yeah, but do you think how people are treated in the workplace, then there is a issue with the gender?
So I'll definitely say that, women have it a bit more difficult in terms of workplace conflicts because they tend to be in the minority depending on the industry that you're in. So there are 4 conflict styles. So you have avoiding, accommodating, competing, and collaborating.
From a gender perspective, do you think there's a difference between how men and women handle conflict?
I don't want to limit it to a gender perspective because I think how we deal with conflict stems from our social upbringing. I think on a broad scale, it's social and cultural. I think most of us really don't learn how to internalize things and learn how to live peaceably with people. We have a tendency to be very selfish. It doesn't really matter with gender. There's instances where we would gender stereotype people, but at the same time, we have to consider the fact that with age and maturity and with time, that things seem more platonic on a more plateau level with regards to gender and conflict management. I think women tend to do conflict management a little less than men do. I think men generally, really and truly, we don't really care about a lot of things. And we try not to allow things to bother us on a great extent as it would women. Or in our culture, we don't tend to show emotion. I think men also get into more physical contact than women do. I think women are the type of persons that will prolong a conversation, will prolong malice as opposed to a man. So those are little things based on our culture and social upbringing that we have.
You mentioned that men don't necessarily prolong conversations, or they don't let a lot of things bother them. But do you think that men internalize things too much?
Too much.
Mm-hmm.
I think the issue with men is, especially in our culture in Jamaica, is that we are taught that we're not supposed to cry, we're not supposed to express ourselves in a particular way because it makes us effeminate. The problem is that needs to be debunked rather, because it's a myth. I feel like men we do think about these things, but the problem is that because of what culture says, because of what society says, we don't necessarily allow ourselves to experience emotion. We don't allow ourselves to really and truly examine how we feel, but instead we just look at the situation and say, all right, probably I can't control this, I'm just going to put it to the side. And what happens when we constantly push our emotions to the side is that we build up anger over time and hate and bitterness, and because of that, eventually the boiling pot explodes at the end of the day.
What is the number one statement or question you think you've heard over the years when it comes to conflict between millennials and older generation?
All right, as it relates to the number one statement that I've heard over the years is the lack of understanding that both all generations involved feels that the other generation doesn't understand them, and I think they know everything and they don't listen, and as such there's a barrier between each generation.
What are the top 3 things you would give them to improve their communication or help the older generation to understand the new generation and the new generation to understand the old?
I would say go forth in each conversation with an open mind. Put aside the perceptions that you would have. I think that's one of the issues that we have. We assume, especially you find that happening with our older generations, to like, some may believe, so you can't tell me otherwise. So if we can begin conversations, or it doesn't have to be a conversation, it can be a setting. I would say, great instances, if talking to the person isn't working, find an approach that best suits them. And as such, try to understand from their perspective too. Because we may think that what we're thinking or what we believe works for us, but it may not work for the other parties. So get rid of yourself of the perceptions that you have of the generations. And everybody says so. But rid yourself of the perceptions that you may have and see how best you can help based on the issues that they may have with you, or they tell you that they have, or you think they may have. Say, okay, so how does that benefit them? Is it that is how they were brought up? Is there another way that we could work around this to make it happen? Is there a certain area that could probably bring us together? Think of ways in which you could, resolve the conflict or whatever it is that they feel strongly about or what you feel strongly about, and find a common ground there.
A lot of times when we share our views or share our ideas or stuff, it can come off as though we want to eradicate their morals or their ideas or how they grew up. And that's not really the intent. We're just trying to say that it's a different era and it's different thought processes, it's different, schooling, parenting. Sometimes it's hard to let them understand that even though it happened, it's okay and things can get better and it's not the end of the world. But a lot of judgment comes down. A lot of judgment is cast down on the person who's experiencing it. And sometimes people can feel alone and afraid, especially when they don't have the support system that they thought they would have. What would you recommend, or how would they go about just letting them understand? And yes, I know commonality and getting to a common ground, letting communication take place. But on serious ideas, serious occasions like that, how do you really talk to them? Like, yes, listening to their stories and how they used to be in their days, but how do you talk to them? How do you say and actually share your actual emotions, especially for people who are scared and people who really and truly need the backing of those they love?